Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 7th update for the Chiltern Society, HS2 and its impact on the Chilterns AOMB. Or perhaps I should say HS2 and its impact on the Chilterns national landscape, because that's how it's been rebranded. I want to start with a much revised construction timetable. Phase 1 from London to Birmingham was originally due to be completed in 2026. Phase 2A was due to run from the West Midlands onto Crewe, and 2B extended the route to Manchester and Leeds, and those were all due to be completed by 2033. 2019, HS2 confirmed that the project would be delayed by up to 7 years. Phase 1 would now be completed sometime between 2028 and 2033. Phase 2A sometime between 2030 and 2034. Phase 2B, the western leg from Crewe to Manchester, 2035 to 2041. The eastern leg to Leeds was subsequently cancelled in 2021. Following further delays and cancellations, a term we're all too familiar with railways, of course, albeit ones that are usually actually running, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, announced at the 2023 Tory party conference that the route beyond Birmingham would be scrapped altogether. He said facts around HS2 have changed, costs have increased, delivery has been delayed, and the pandemic has changed the travel patterns HS2 was originally designed to serve. It will still reach Euston, though, eventually, perhaps. In his 6-monthly report to Parliament for November 2023, Transport Minister Hugh Merriman stated that an updated delivery into service range for services to Euston will be provided in due course. Euston will now have just 6 platforms instead of the originally planned 11, and possibly running only 8 trains an hour rather than the planned 17 in peak times. As I said, unbelievably, no decision has been made on the train service that will run once HS2 is operational. The government stated that there must be some accountability for the mismanagement of the project, and so HS2 will no longer be responsible for the Euston site. Instead, the government are looking to appoint a property development company separate from HS2 Limited to manage the delivery of the project. I try not to comment on such things, but I have to say what an absolutely damning indictment of HS2's management of the scheme this is, and we're all paying a high price for it. The updated cost estimate for phase 1 is 49 to 57 billion pounds at 2019 prices. This is, of course, just for the route from Euston to Birmingham and onto the Handsacre Junction, where it will link to the West Coast Main Line. This is a very significant increase on HS2's previous projections and is nearly double the original cost of the whole project. Some £25 billion has already been spent or committed, and the current spend is around £140 million a week, or £7 billion a year. That's roughly the equivalent of a new hospital every month. HS2 will approach the Chilterns via the 2.1 mile long Colne Valley Viaduct across the Colne Valley Regional Park near Denham. This will be the longest viaduct in the UK, yet it will take trains just 40 seconds to cross it. This is looking across Harefield number 2 Lake towards the south abutment. This is actually in Hillingdon. The viaduct is supported by 56 piers between spans that are up to 80 metres long. Next is the Grand Union Canal, and here we can see the launching girder working its way across Savay Lake. The canal will be closed for 5 weeks from February the 1st to allow the launching girder to build the section across the canal and the towpath. The launching girder weighs 700 tons and moves methodically from one pier to the next. Each precast deck segment weighs up to 140 tons, and they are installed on each side of the pier in turn to maintain a balance. This shows the viaduct crossing the Moorhall Road and then on across Corder Lake. These are the largest piers which take the viaduct over the lakes and weigh 1,800 tons. Each took 9 months to build and they were all cast on site. Coffer dams were used to hold back the water, while 60-metre deep foundations were built into the bed of the lake. Apparently, the fish were removed from the lake before construction commenced. This is one of the largest sections being lowered into place. They are glued together with steel tensioning cables threaded through the segments to strengthen the bridge, and you can see the holes where the cables go. You can also see the internal walkway, which will run the length of the viaduct. The segments are all made on site and transported along the completed sections of the viaduct. The factory used to make them is actually bigger than the Albert Hall. They are currently making 12 each week, and 1,000 will be needed altogether. As the viaduct is on an elongated curve, every segment will be slightly different, depending on where it fits into the viaduct. Here, the viaduct passes the old clubhouse at the Denham Water Ski Club. A new one was built on the opposite side of the lake. And this is looking back across the lake towards the viaduct. And you can just see the old clubhouse on the other side. I have to say it's an ugly thing, but it's nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. And here we look north along the section that crosses the A412, the North Orbital Road. And that's the same section taken from below. A parapet is being added, and there will also be a sound deflecting barrier above that. Overhead catenary and high voltage power cables will be added later. Moving on, the route leaves the viaduct just north of the A412 and continues towards the south portal of the Chiltern Tunnel. This is the West Hyde embankment just beyond the 412. These embankments were all made with the slurry, treated slurry from the tunnels, as was the landscaping here. This is the Tilehouse Lane cutting, and as I mentioned, landscaping using a lot of landscaping here using the treated slurry. This is an impression of the eventual view north from the viaduct across the landscaped area. Called the Colne Valley Western Slopes, it will be over 300 acres of chalk grassland, woodland and wetland habitats. This is the only section of the route in Hertfordshire. As you can see, 65,000 trees and shrubs will be planted here alone. Here we're looking across the route from the 412 as the Tilehouse Lane cutting becomes the Chiltern Tunnel south cutting as it approaches the tunnel portal on the right. There are 3 factories on site. Beyond the viaduct segment factory already mentioned is the tunnel lining factory, and beyond that is the slurry treatment plant. 112,000 tunnel lining segments were produced here, and the last were made at the end of 2023. So that factory has now been decommissioned. It's done its job. The slurry treatment plant will soon finish its work as well, having treated some 3 million cubic meters of spoil. The demands on the batching plant will also be much reduced. All HGVs arriving at the compound use these temporary slip roads off the M1025, keeping them off local roads. The next section of the route is the 10.6-mile long twin-bore Chiltern Tunnel, and the tunnel portal is just south of the M25 between junctions 17 and 16, and you can see it just alongside the motorway. The two tunnel boring machines, TBM, started tunnelling here in May 2021. They will have finished their work by the end of February, but more on this when we get to the North Portal. This is the actual tunnel portal, the entrance to the tunnels, and you can just see the M25 at the top. It shows how close it is to the M25. Here we can see the construction of the upline porous portal. This is a section at either end of the tunnel, which is has openings to the outside air. As a train enters the tunnel at one end, it generates a pressure wave, which can produce noise at the other end of the tunnel. The porous portal slows the build-up of the pressure wave in the tunnel, reducing the resultant effect. And looking back from here along the route, and this, as we've mentioned, will be the Chiltern Tunnel South cutting, which trains will come into as they approach the portal. And this is more or less the same view looking back, showing the last crop growing there across a field of barley. This is an HS2 picture showing a section of the completed tunnel. Each one will have a 1 meter wide walkway, which will be used for passenger evacuation in the event of an emergency. There will be cross passages between the tunnels every 320 meters, 38 of them in total. Each will be between 15 and 20 meters long, lined with concrete and finished with a safety door. About a third have been completed so far. These tunnels are excavated using noisy equipment, which can be heard above ground, particularly when breaking through the tunnel lining sections. This caused some disturbance to some residents for several weeks, initially around the clock, but following complaints, not overnight. This came as a shock as there was no warning, and it was assumed that there will be no further disturbance once the TBMs had passed underneath. Crosses show the area we'll be looking at now from the M25 across the centre of Chilterns to Wendover. This shows the 4 ventilation shafts across the Chilterns. There will also be an intervention shaft near the North Tunnel portal at South Heath. These would also be used for emergency access during the operation of the railways. The tunnels themselves will be 90 meters below the ground. At their deepest, just alongside Gore Hill, which going up from Amersham towards Beaconsfield. The A413, which we mentioned, is the main road passing the Chalfonts and Amersham, and then on to Great Missenden and Wendover. This is the first of the shafts, the Chalfont St Peter vent shaft in Chesham Lane. Construction of all the shafts themselves is now complete. They will all have a head house across the top of the shaft. These will be single story and will be the main building seen on the surface. Chalfont St Giles vent shaft is situated at the top of Bottom House Farm Lane. Access to the shaft is via a half-mile long temporary haul road from the A413. You can see the top of the shaft and the basement alongside. Bottom House Farm Lane continues in its original form off to the left beyond the vent shaft. The TBMs reached here in September 2022, and this was taken last May and shows the development of the basement. Basement has now been covered and the head house is under construction. This is the top of the shaft, which is 34 metres deep, and the tunnels are 26 metres below the ground, less than half the depth of the Chalfont St Peter shaft. This is now covered by the head house, again much bigger than we were expecting. Lifts have not been installed here yet, so it's 108 steps down to the tunnels. The shaft is linked to the tunnels by a passageway known as an adit, and you can see into the tunnel there. I didn't think I was going to be able to take this picture, but here we are. This is actually in the tunnel itself, underneath the Chalfont St Giles vent shaft. This is the down tunnel from London, and we're actually looking north. Beyond the partition is the connection from the tunnel directly into the ventilation shafts. The pipes along the wall carry water to the tunnel face and then slurry back to the south portal, 10 miles in each direction at the moment. And then this is looking back towards Chalfont St Giles. Tunnel ventilation is currently provided via the large tube in the roof. And then it's 108 steps back up again. This is the top of the shaft revealed when the basement is constructed. This is the top of the shaft at basement level once that has been removed. And then this is the view looking towards the shaft now. These pictures were taken a couple of weeks ago. This is rather like, reminds me of the huge turbine halls at the power stations. If any of you have been to the Tate Modern, the large turbine hall there. And this is where the fans will be housed. Air will be extracted and released via these chimneys. And these are housed in this second building seen here above ground. The third building will house the auto transformer station, and this is the base prior to construction. And this is an impression of what the whole thing will look like eventually. You can see the head house is the main building, auto transformer station, and then the actual vents themselves, the outlet of the vents in the small building on the right. The haul road here will be removed once construction of the vent shaft is complete. Bottom House Farm Lane was a narrow single track road, and this is how it was before construction. And this is as it is now. It's been widened and drainage has been installed, but it remains a single track road with passing places. Been substantial planting here, which has been very successful, and the beginnings of a new hedge now appear on the left-hand side. Bottom House Farm Lane will be reinstated, but it's not been decided yet just how this will be done. as the original approach to the junction was just too steep. The Amersham vent shaft is situated in Wilden Lane, west of Amersham Hospital. The A404 goes to High Wycombe, and the A413 turns right towards Great Missenden. Looking west, you can see the A404 joining the A413 alongside the compound. For all the sites between Amersham and Stoke Mandeville, the access route is the A413, the A355 up Gore Hill to Beaconsfield, and then to the M40. Here you can see the top of the shaft itself. The shaft depth here is 43 metres, and the tunnels are 30 metres below the ground. Construction of the head house here is due to begin in April. This gives an idea of the final layout, with the tunnel straddling the vent shaft, with the head house sitting on the top. You can see the adit which connects the shaft to the tunnels. All the shafts will have a permanent area of hard standing for emergency and service vehicles. Each will be about 550 square metres. The tunnel passes between the 18th century Shardlow's house and Shardlow's Lake. In the last update, I mentioned the sinkhole that had appeared above one of the TBMs just south of Shardlow's Lake. A line the contractors excavated below the bottom of the hole until competent ground was reached. The area was then backfilled using material previously excavated from the Little Missenden vent shaft. And here you can see it being trundling past Shardlow's at the top of the hill. The ground subsidence occurred 10 metres above groundwater level in superficial deposits and should not have a long-term impact on local groundwater flow paths or the hydrology. The fourth shaft is alongside the A413 in Little Missenden. This is looking west across the vent shaft and the A413, and it shows the close proximity of the River Misbourne, which you can see running across the top of the picture. With much relief, the TBMs passed under the river for the second time without any apparent damage. The shaft depth here is 31 metres, and the tunnels will be 24 metres below the ground. This is an impression of what the head house here would look like. Once planting is completed, the shaft will be hardly visible from the road. 1,700 trees will be planted here, some 20 different species. The TBMs then set off up the hill towards South Heath, passing under the Chiltern railway line. This will be one of the steepest gradients on the whole rail network. Because of a known geological fault in this area, additional monitoring was put in place. Last November, as the first TBM passed 18 metres below footpath GMI 27 and the edge of Hedgemore Wood, ground movement was observed, and then a sinkhole appeared. The public bridleway was closed, the area then fenced off, and the livestock removed. The contractors engaged with key stakeholders, including the landowner and Buckinghamshire Council. Remedial works were then completed, and the footpath reopened within 6 weeks. Tunneling operations continued, with the excavation parameters adjusted to suit the ground conditions, and there were no further mishaps. I'm grateful to Mike Johnson for providing these pictures. The Chesham Road shaft is an intervention shaft only. It will not have any fans, so will not have a basement. Because the shaft is above the water table, a different form of construction called the caisson method was used for this shaft. Sections of the caisson were constructed above ground and then sunk to the required level by excavating material from within the caisson. And this is the same view now, taken earlier this week. And the main work here now is the construction of the head house. As with all the shafts, large shuttering panels are used to form the walls. A framework of reinforcing bars are then put in place and the voids created filled with concrete. There are actually two head houses here, one at each side of the shaft. I don't quite know why they need to be so big, but single story. This is the top of the shaft itself. Because there are no fans, it is quite simple. A lift shaft is on one side and a staircase the other, with an open space in the middle. The shaft depth here is 46 metres and the tunnels are 33 metres below ground. The TBMs passed here earlier this month. Here's the base of the auto transformer station, and they're actually preparing for a concrete pour. To the right is the slab where the transformer will sit. And apparently site demobilisation will be early next year. And here we can see just how near or close to the North Tunnel portal, which is just over a half a mile from the Chesham Road shaft. The TBMs are currently under Sibley's Coppice, which is an ancient woodland. South Heath is on the right, and the Chesham Road from Great Missenden runs across the middle of the picture. And looking north towards the portal and the South Heath cutting, you can see the extent of the excavation right across the Chilterns. You can see the A413 on the left-hand side of the picture as it goes on towards Wendover. Frithhill will be closed to traffic from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. for most of February for daily monitorings as the TBMs pass underneath, and then a monthly monitoring until the summer. As they approach the North Portal, the TBMs will bore through the 96 pillars that will support the tunnels. They will exit the tunnels next month and then be dismantled and removed. You can see large concrete blocks that stand in their way. These give the TBMs something to bore through as they need to compress the lining sections as they move forward. They will be dismantled one section at a time as they move forward on this lowered section of the track. I had hoped they would come out all in one go and I had to take some pictures, but just one section at a time. Trains will eventually leave the tunnel here, travelling at 200 miles an hour. As you can imagine, huge amounts of concrete have been used here, all produced by the batching plant at the South Portal and then transported by road, a round trip for each load of around 40 miles. Batching plant is now under construction just to the north to supply the next section of the route. A viewing platform has been installed here, which means it's now possible to see the portal without the need for personal protection equipment. This is where the VIPs will watch the first of the TBMs emerge next month. Here we are looking east across the South Heath cutting towards Jenkins Wood, more or less along the route of footpath GMI 13, which is closed now, but will eventually be diverted over the portal. Cutting here is about 15 metres deep, and this is the same view taken before construction began and after the last harvest. The overhead power lines were realigned here via a new pylon. The route continues in a cutting under a series of bridges. In this section, these are all over bridges, meaning that they cross over the railway. The route alignment has been designed to enable speeds up to 225 miles an hour north of the Chiltern Tunnel. The contractor, as far as the tunnel portal, is a line joint venture. So they made the viaduct and the tunnel. They will now take over some of the sites to the north of the tunnel from EKFB, who are the contractors for the rest of the route across Buckinghamshire. The first bridge will take the footpath GMI 12 over the route. Mulberry Park Hill was the first house in the Chilterns to be demolished to make way for construction. Once complete, the bridge will give the only view of the tunnel portal, and this is an artist's impression of what that might look like. I have to say, this is nowhere near as bad as I imagined when I tramped over this area over the years, because you can't see it. It's all below ground. So you'll only be able to see it from one of the overbridges. That's the only view you will get of it. This shows the second of the bridges, footpath GMI 12, where construction is underway. This is called an accommodation overbridge, meaning that it will also be used for farming access. The route then crosses Leather Lane. Offline construction means the bridge will be built to the south of the road, which will then be diverted once construction is complete. 11 large oak trees have been removed so far. An alternative plan for the overbridge involving the loss of fewer trees has been submitted by EKFB for HS2's approval. As the line have now taken over this site, we have to wait and see if they will proceed with these plans or come up with new ones of their own. There's also a campaign to save an iconic oak tree, which has been named Ilona, as it stands in the way of a proposed earth bund. As you can see at the moment, it's still standing. This is looking east across the actual route towards the oak trees awaiting their fate. Looking beyond Leather Lane, you can see the Iron Age earthworks of Grim's Ditch. Alas, a large section has been destroyed, and sheet piling has been installed to protect what remains. The plan to build Cottage Farm Overbridge nearby has now been abandoned. The next bridge is another accommodation bridge, taking footpath TLE2 over the route. This is a vital bridge as it gives the farmer access to the west of the route, particularly as they're not going to build the Cottage Farm Overbridge. Bowood Lane Overbridge is a short distance away. As the bridge is being constructed online, Bowood Lane is closed, and it will be eventually be reinstated across the bridge once it's completed. The contractors were obviously rather optimistic in when they thought this would be, as you can see, due to reopen in autumn 2023. Well, I don't think it's even going to be autumn 2024. The plans for the overbridge were rejected by Buckinghamshire Council. After a lengthy appeals process, the planning inspector rejected the road safety and environmental arguments for carriageway reduction and additional greening, which was proposed by the council, and will now allow a 5.5 metre carriageway, 2 vehicle width on the overbridge, with a 1.5 metre wide verge on either side. Here we're looking at, you can see the bridge, the two abutments of the bridge. The one in at the foreground is the western abutment. Public footpath that runs alongside Bowood Lane remains open, and there is a man crossing here. All other footpaths crossing the route in this section are closed during construction, so this is a vital diversion route for some, including the very popular Chiltern Way. Bowood Lane is a very little used sunken lane, and it was difficult to imagine how it would look once construction of the overbridge got underway. And this is the same view looking west across the route. The route continues over Wendover Dean Viaduct, starting just north of Jones Hill Wood, where there were a large number of protesters a few years ago. The viaduct will be 450 metres long and consists of 10 spans. Each pier needed 6 piles, 2 metres in diameter and 40 metres deep. The need for such deep foundations is that the line is actually on a bend over the viaduct, so that they have to cope with large sideways forces. The viaduct sections are precast off-site before being transported to the site by road. The first of the 38 steel beams completed their 560-mile journey all the way from France ahead of the start of deck construction. And here you can see the first of the 5 90-metre long spans being pushed out onto the first viaduct. This is an impression of what it will look like. Its maximum height will be 20 metres, and it's designed for trains to travel at 225 miles an hour. The next section is the Rocky Lane cutting. The route here is getting close to the 413, which you can see running along the bottom of the picture, and the work can be seen from the road. The route then crosses Rocky Lane on its way towards Wendover. This will be an underbridge, meaning it will go under the route. There is a fuel storage and maintenance depot alongside the road, the Hall Road, and you can see that to the right-hand side. Offline construction means that this busy lane will remain open while a bridge is constructed just to the north of the lane. The lane will then be realigned under the route. Beyond Rocky Lane, Small Dean South embankment leads onto the Small Dean Viaduct. This will take the route over the 413 just before the Wendover bypass. The viaduct will be 340 metres long and take 2 years to build. It will take the route over the 413, the Chiltern Railway and Small Dean Lane. The northern end will be near the roundabout at the end of the Wendover bypass. A fully enclosed 600-metre long conveyor system has been built to remove the stored spoil from earlier earthworks across the A413, the railway and Small Dean Lane. Once fully operational, it will move an estimated 1.4 million tonnes of materials. It's expected to save some 400 HGV movements a day over a 3.5-year period. This can be seen, this conveyor system, just as you approach Wendover, You can see an enclosed bridge. A lot of people think it's a pedestrian bridge, but that's what it is. It's a conveyor system. The A413 has been realigned slightly to allow construction of two of the viaduct piers. And here you can see before it's tied in on the left-hand side of the road. This is an artist's impression of what the viaduct might look like. The underside of the viaduct will be just 6 meters above the road, and it will be supported by 5 Y-shaped piers. There'll also be noise barriers along the top of the viaduct, so there won't be much of a view from the trains. The route continues on the Small Dean North embankment up to 14 metres high, runs alongside the Wendover bypass. Grove Farm Underbridge will take the farm access road under the railway, and this will actually be the last bridge in the Chilterns. The route then enters the cut and cover Wendover Green Tunnel alongside Backham Lane. Backham Lane will be closed for 2 years, and a temporary link road will connect through to Ellsborough Road. This can't be built until a high voltage cable has been moved. The contractors hope that this will be later this year. Ellsborough Road will be diverted behind the remaining houses during construction of the tunnel, and this is due to open next month. Here we're looking east, and you can see Wendover Station and the Chiltern Railway near the top of the picture. Rather sadly, the cricket clubhouse has been left there, no doubt being used. Excavations have now started here, and we're looking east towards Wendover. And once the diversion is open, the road will be closed and reopened when the tunnel is completed. So this is just on the other side of the road, left-hand side of the picture is where the 6 houses were demolished in Ellsborough Road. And here we're looking west. The sheet piling has been installed to protect the Wendover Memorial woodland. On the right, you can see the bridge that takes the diversion over the tunnel. Thames Water have pointed out to EKFB that the eastern end of their new road bridge will be too low to allow sewage to flow to the A413 Chiltern Railway Bridge. Rather than building a sewage pumping station, EKFB concluded that the best solution was to build a second bridge to allow the diverted pipe to remain at the existing road altitude, Ellsborough Road altitude. Again, I make no comment, and I thank Murray Cook for that update. This will be, there will be temporary closures of Ellsborough Road to allow the tie-in to be completed. And once the diversion is open, traffic will turn left here. And this is a view down the diversion. Wendover Tunnel will be 3/4 of a mile long. It will be built by excavating a cutting in the ground, forming a tunnel box from precast segments, and then covering it over with landscaping. This is what construction of a cut and cover tunnel looks like. This is actually the Chipping Warden Tunnel in Northamptonshire. EKFB will continue with the cutting part, and a line will then take over and complete the construction process. The North Portal will be just north of Folly Bridge. That's the last of the bridges across the Wendover bypass. There are serious concerns that construction would interfere with the flow of water into the Wendover arm of the Grand Union Canal and Western Turville Reservoir SSI Nature Reserve, diverting it towards Stoke Mandeville and possibly increasing the flood risk. Clive Johnson of the Wendover Canal Trust informs me that we are now reassured by EKFB that the catchment area for the Wendover Canal is largely unaffected because it is mainly to the south of Wendover where HS2 is on a viaduct. As the tunnel is above the water table, it will be dry inside. The Wendover North cutting will be encapsulated so that water in the aquifers will find its way underneath. If anything, the flow to the canal might slightly increase because water which currently drains towards Western Turville Reservoir will be slightly displaced towards the canal. Whilst this is reassuring, questions still remain. On leaving the tunnel, the route will enter the Wendover North cutting. The route then leaves the Chilterns, crossing Nashley Road on its way to Stoke Mandeville and on to the Vale of Aylesbury. The road here is temporarily diverted while Nashley Road overbridge is constructed. As I've said, the approved access route for all the sites from Amersham to Stoke Mandeville is via the M40 to Beaconsfield, A355 to Amersham, and then the A413 north towards Wendover. These are the latest figures I have, and they're a bit out of date. They're actually September, October last year. Forecast daily HGV numbers travelling along the A413 Amersham bypass and up Gore Hill in October was 372. 372 HGVs per day in each direction. You can see most of the pictures I've used here by visiting the HS2 photo diary on the Chiltern Society website. This shows the impact at a number of locations across the Chilterns, and it's constantly updated. There are also links to various videos, including a virtual fly-through along the route from Denham to Calvert beyond Aylesbury. I'm happy to do this talk to any of you that belong to groups. If you're interested in seeing the presentation, then contact me or the office. I lost my pilot last year when Andy Cordner stopped flying from Denham, and I'm very grateful to Robert Urquhart, who offered to take over. We have managed a couple of flights with varying success, but at least I have a replacement pilot. Again, I'm also very grateful to the contractors for their cooperation and for allowing me access to many of the sites. And thank you, all the others who have contributed to this update. The next update will be the 8th, and that will take place on July the 13th. So there is a date for your diary.